Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead Daryl Dixon video. So here is my review for the very first episode of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 2. Really great episode. I want to talk about all the new characters that we met, and I want to talk about a lot of the storylines here that were introduced. There was something here that I was really not expecting, and I can't believe the story's actually going in this direction here. The storyline between Carol and Ash is very, very interesting, and already I think that part to it has me really excited for the season. So before we go any further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my breakdowns of every single episode, my trailer breakdowns and all of that. I will be doing a trailer breakdown after this. I'm also going to be doing videos on the opening credits because we did get new opening credits, so I will do a video breaking down all of that, as well as some other videos breaking down some more scenes, like more specifically on certain things that happened in episode 1. That'll be out way later on today, scheduled for when the episode is over on cable. So if you're watching on cable tonight, as soon as the episode is over, those videos will go live, and yeah, I'll talk about more specifics of the episode, and yeah, The Walking Dead is back here. So again, really amazing episode here. I think if I were to rate the episode anything, I'd probably say it was likely like an 8 out of 10. Again, because nothing crazy happened, but I think that it just set up the story really well. Like, with where we were in the finale of season 1, we saw Daryl finally make it to the nest, and then he decides to leave, but then sort of decides to go back because Laurent is there. And obviously for season 2 and what's going on in France, you sort of have to set up something else for Daryl. I thought they did a pretty good job with setting up a lot of that because there's not a lot you have to do. I mean, it makes sense. Madame Janae is going to want revenge, but you just have to do something in that episode because obviously they really wanted to focus on Carol. And so I think this episode here, you know, being so focused on Carol was definitely, I think, really smart because obviously Daryl got a whole season to himself beforehand, right? I think that's why this season is called The Book of Carol, because you're focusing a lot more on Carol for this season. And then I think in season 3, it is going to be a lot more even, obviously. I think that Daryl is still going to be a big part of the season overall, obviously. Carol just had more screen time in this episode specifically, but going forward, it's not going to be all Carol. It's just that it's going to be more like 51-49, right? Like you're going to, you know, give Carol a little bit more of the spotlight. And honestly, in this episode, you can see why that was a really smart decision because I really missed Melissa McBride as Carol. Honestly, I know she was there in season 1 of Daryl Dixon, but it just never really felt like she was there. And this feels like her actual return to The Walking Dead. So it was really nice to see her and just see, you know, the story that I guess that they're setting up here. Now, there was the opening minutes of the episode where we did see Daryl and Laurent. They were outside training to kill walkers and whatnot. It's been 2 weeks since the finale of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon season 1. Falou and Emile are missing. Daryl and Losang are disagreeing quite a bit here because Losang doesn't want Laurent to be, you know, training to fight walkers, but Daryl wants him to learn that because he believes that it's a smart skill to have, which obviously I think most of us would agree with that. But Losang doesn't want Laurent to, I guess, be put in a situation that could be very dangerous. I do think there's a lot more here, though. I think there's a reason why Losang wants that. I think there is probably a connection to Madame Janae here. Something's off. Like, we don't know everything exactly, but there is definitely more here. Daryl and Isabel talk about Daryl being unsure of where he has to be. So again, they're sort of bringing that back up here because that is still a thing for Daryl. He doesn't know where he wants to be. Like, obviously he feels like he should be here and helping them out, but he also wants to go back home. Like, he misses his family back home, and I think ultimately that is where he wants to go. But it's just, yeah, he feels very conflicted, and I think, I mean, that's what's going to be so interesting about his mindset and where that goes once Carol is there. Because I feel like if Carol is there, I think that could honestly change a lot. But then we cut to a scene here with Carol going to the mechanic shop, and I really like the line where she says certifiable. Honestly, I think that is just exactly Carol in this episode is, because I think someone calls her crazy or something like that, and then she's like certifiable, and like, honestly, really like iconic line. I mean, it's funny because the one thing that I will say that I learned about Carol in this episode is that she can really read people well. Like, she really can, and she knows how to, you know, say certain things to get you to think this or believe this. Like, she's definitely very smart and she understands people very, very well. And I think that's why she's alive to this day. That's why she survived everything, is because of that. And she does learn here that French scientists came to look for American walkers. And obviously that was sort of the setup here. The opening credits happen. And that's, I guess, where we're going into the season here, right? Carol is going to try and get to France now. And I will say, I do have some questions overall about some things in this episode. Like, I think for that moment there, I don't really understand why the mechanic shop is constantly fixing cars. Like, I don't know, you know, are they selling the cars to people for resources? who's walking around or whatever trying to get vehicles. Like, I just don't understand why the mechanic shop is there and what they're doing. Like, I feel like that's a question that should be answered. I don't even think we'll ever see them again, to be honest. And so I don't really understand, I guess, all of that. I'm very curious about that. But the opening credits, we do see Carol in the opening credits, which was really cool. Daryl is there as well. I'll do a more in-depth breakdown of all of this here in a video later on. But yeah, I really like seeing Carol in the opening credits. And then we also see Carol listening to music in the car, and I just thought it was a really cool scene. It's a really fun scene. Carol has her sunglasses on and she's just like driving this car, listening to music, you know, just sort of enjoying life in that moment there. And then she hears this plane go by, and so she's sort of confused and is wondering what's going on. And then this therapy tape or something comes on, and then she doesn't want to hear it. And that was the first sign right there. I will say there were some early reviews that did say that a lot of the story with Sophia and whatnot felt forced. I was really looking for that, you know, watching this episode, and I just don't think that makes a lot of sense at all. I think that it makes sense. Like, obviously, if you're a writer and you're thinking of, well, we're going to do a spinoff on Carol and Daryl, so where should we take Carol's story next? And if you want to bring up some of the Sophia stuff, like, that's a decision you're making. But if you look at the original series, it's not like they focused on that much. If you really look at how Carol dealt with it, she just really got really tough, and she kind of ignored everything else, and she just made really hard decisions and just did whatever she could to survive. And she really ignored a lot of what she was going through. And we saw in this scene right here that as soon as that therapy tape came on, Carol was just getting really mad. Like, she didn't even want to deal with it. She didn't want to hear any of that. And that makes sense. Like, Carol is very much like that. That's a lot of, you know, how she's handled situations throughout the entire original series. And so I don't think it's that convenient. I mean, a lot of this is coming up specifically because Daryl is missing. And so Daryl being missing is going to remind her of Sophia going missing, because the last time, you know, I don't know if it was the last time, but you know, the fact that she's in a situation where the one person that she's very, very close to, Daryl, is missing and could be in France, and she might not ever see him again, or he could be dead, or like, you know, where's Daryl? This is going to bring up a lot of feelings of what happened with Sophia. And then the fact that she learned what she learned from Ash, I mean, I think a lot of that makes sense as to why Carol is starting to feel like this. Like, everything is coming back up. And again, it's not like she was crazy emotional in this episode. It's just that some of that came up because she's talking about her backstory a little bit. She's reminded of this here and there, but it's more of the lie that she told, and the fact that she can relate that with Ash because he lost his kid in order to get to France, right? So to me, this whole thing is not forced at all. It's actually really cleverly written, and I really like the fact that this is how Carol gets to France. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to convince him to take me to France. It's actually, no, you lost your kid earlier on, and I'm just going to make up this lie that my daughter never actually died early on in the apocalypse. She could still be out there in France, and Ed took her to France before the apocalypse started. Like, it's just insane that Carol would even say that. But we'll talk about that once we get to the moment, because I have a lot of thoughts on that. Honestly, I'm completely shocked that Carol would even lie about that. But yeah, I guess that shows how desperate she is, right, to find Daryl. So we do see Carol going to find Ash, and I thought a lot of that stuff was pretty cool. I will say the convenience of finding a plane in all of this is kind of, you know, it's hilarious, because she literally learns that Daryl is in France and is just like, what do I do? And is driving her car, and then she sees a plane. It's just like, what? Like, that is definitely way too convenient. I think that the best way to work out a story like that where it made sense was if Madame Genet was still having scientists go to America with their ships and whatnot, and so Carol waited there for the ship, then eventually got on the ship, and then just something there, right? Like, work out a story there. I think that makes a lot more sense than randomly after you find that out you're driving and then you see a plane. Like, how many people see planes? So that was definitely a little bit off. But I will say, in terms of a story, you know, being, I guess, a little too convenient, sometimes it's not necessarily always a bad thing, right? Like, I think that sometimes, yes, you can look at that and be like, okay, like, that was way too, like, you could see the writing there, right? But I just think that sometimes it's all right. Like, I think if things are a bit too convenient, it can work out if you're overall trying to tell, I think, the story a certain way. And I think the way they told the story here of episode 1 was really well done. And so I can overlook a moment like that, even though it is kind of ridiculous. That has happened a lot in The Walking Dead, just in general. Even going back to season 1, it happens all the time. That's just something that happens in TV shows. There's always an element of that, right? But yeah, and then, yeah, we see Ash helping Carol out, and obviously we learn that, I mean, she's trying to use him there. The scene where she's lying, like, immediately, like, the second that she's faking that she got trapped in that trap, whatever, that Ash set, like, right away, you're like, this whole thing right here is starting off really bad already, because Carol's already lying. And then, yeah, just the way the whole scene plays out though, Carol seeing Sophia, I will say the flashback was just really well done. I didn't think we were going to get so much of it. I didn't think the scene was happening at nighttime and she was remembering what happened in the past. I thought that was really well done instead of it just being during the day and then it was just kind of whatever. The way they actually did the whole scene was really cool. And also, I know a lot of it was CGI, but they did actually recast the part. I think it was mixed with some of the old footage as well, but it was really well done because you never see Sophia's face. So there's never really a moment where you're like, okay, so they definitely recast the part. I think they actually played it out really well where Carol immediately, you know, because lately she's been forced to deal with some of the stuff that she's been feeling. She's been feeling really awful, really stressed out. She comes across a barn and then right away thinks of Sophia. And again, I'm sure she thinks of Sophia every single day. Like, obviously she does, right? Like, that's the thing. On The Walking Dead, we never saw a lot of that because there's so many characters. You have to give everyone a storyline, but obviously she thinks of Sophia every single day. Like, there's no way she doesn't. And so, yeah, Carol stays in the barn. And at this point here, Ash says that, you know, he has to, or he stays here because he has everything here that he needs. And so that was a really interesting line. Right away, everyone's sort of wondering, what's going on here with the story, right? You're sort of wondering who Ash is in general. I thought the scene the next morning was pretty cool. Just Ash in general, you sort of learned, and I don't know if that's necessarily true, but my interpretation of a lot of how everything was happening was he has everything set on timers so well, like he's really keeping track of the time. And I think it's because he does want to keep himself busy. I really feel like he's just staying there for his son, and he does feel bad about the loss of his son. And we'll get into that in a second because he actually goes into that. But I think a lot of that there, you know, his life does revolve around the fact that he feels so guilty that his son is gone and he's still there. And Melissa McBride talked about that Carol starts to go through that. You know, it's like survivor's guilt or something. And I wonder if this is starting to bring that up quite a bit here because Carol obviously was very uncomfortable with certain things that Ash said in this episode, right? And so, yeah, but we do see Ash take the plane for a plane ride, which was really cool. Carol then goes to investigate and look around and is wondering, like, what's Ash about, right? And then goes into a greenhouse here, and that's where she learns a lot more about Ash. He had a son, and then, finds this little music box, and Carol starts to sing, "You Are My Sunshine," and right away reminds her of Sophia. And that right there was honestly a really heartbreaking scene. I felt so sad for Carol, like, just, you know, moments like that where you're just reminded of, you know, for her, Sophia, like, that was just such a heartbreaking scene. And I just, yeah, honestly, really incredible moments in this episode. But walkers show up and really crazy sequence happens here. What I really liked about this, though, was the fact that it just got so intense that Carol had to climb up the shelves and then break the glass on top in order to get out. I do like how realistic it was, though, because Ash came back and saved Carol, because I think if Carol, you know, like, there was no way she was going to be able to walk on top. Like, the glass could have broke. There was a lot of things there. So Carol just sort of waiting there, I think, made sense. But Ash showing up and then taking out all the walkers, that made a lot of sense, right? But yeah, he was mad. Like, he was so upset. And Carol was like, well, I just wanted to get to know you a lot better. You know, I wanted a friend. And I was just like, oh, okay, Carol, what are you doing? Like, as soon as she said that, I was just like, it's funny how a lot of the stuff she's saying is like half truths. Like, it's true, but it's not, you know? And so that's like, she knows how to twist a lot of the words that she's saying, where there is an element of truth there, where Ash, if he's not that great at reading people, he's going to look at Carol and totally understand. And I think that's one of the things that immediately, like, once that happened there, I was like, oh man, Carol's saying this right now, this just isn't too good. And so Ash opens up and says, yeah, you know, I feel bad about the loss of my son. I didn't keep him safe. And so it's my job as a parent to keep him safe, and I didn't do that. And Carol hearing all of that, oh, you know, that hit her, because I'm sure she's ignoring a lot of that, right? Ignoring the fact that, you know, that it was her fault, or that, I mean, it wasn't her fault, but I think she's ignoring that feeling of that. And so Ash saying a lot of that, we learn a little bit more about Ash, and we learn why he flies the plane. And I really like the line that he says here. He says he flies so that when he's up so high like that, he can look down, and he just tricks himself for like a moment into thinking that the world is the same. It's just sort of a nice feeling, or a nice thought that, you know, the world is just normal. Like, I'm up here flying a plane and everything's all good. And then we get the Cherokee Rose scene, which I thought was very cool. Like, again, if you're a Carol fan, like, this episode really gave us a lot of, you know, like, a lot of like recognition of a lot of the most iconic moments of The Walking Dead. And that was like the Cherokee Rose scene. You know, there was mentions of Ed and Sophia, and Carol just sort of told her backstory there. But again, it's not like she's just bringing this stuff up because of nostalgia. It's actually playing a part in the story here. And she lies about Sophia's death. Like when she was first talking about Ed and Sophia, again, it's because she's somewhat telling the truth. Like because she is somewhat telling the truth, it seems very believable as she's speaking. Like she's not completely lying about everything here. And so when she's talking about Ed, you know, and then she mentions, you know, that wasn't really a great marriage. It's like, yeah, that was very true. But then she says, just before the apocalypse happened, took Sophia to France. And so obviously planes went down, this and that, and she's never been able to see them since then. The second I heard that, I was like, wow. Like, you know, first of all, I was really impressed because in terms of the writing, that is a really great way of getting Carol to France, right? To convince Ash to actually take Carol to France. But also I was shocked. Like Carol was actually lying to Ash about that, like literally using Sophia's death in order to find Daryl. Like it does show, you know, that she cares for Daryl that much and she really needs to find him, but it is just, it's honestly insane. And it does amaze me how much, like, in terms of character stories in The Walking Dead, we've seen it all at this point, but certain moments like that, it surprises me because honestly, like you can really tell great stories still, like really great character stories in The Walking Dead if you have great writers, right? Because they all have like different perspectives and all obviously newer writers coming onto the show. And that's what Daryl Dixon does have. Like there's completely new writers for this show than the original series. And so that's why a lot of this I think works out. And then, yeah, so this moment here, or up until this moment here, I just thought, yeah, really amazing stuff. But then we go back to France and we see the Mathis team, I guess. And the plan is to intercept Janae's group and then save Falou and Emil. And Daryl wants to go. Losang doesn't want him to go, but obviously Daryl's going to go. And so I do like the scene between Daryl and Losang. And I do think there is going to be a fight scene at some point in the future because Losang asks Daryl, like, do you want to train? And then Daryl's like, not with that toothpick. And yeah, just a really hilarious scene. But I just feel like that was foreshadowing for a moment in the future where they're actually going to have a fight scene or something. And maybe Daryl ends up killing Losang. I have no idea. But I think that is likely going to happen. And I do wonder if, I mean, Daryl's going to have to get really good with his staff or something, right? But obviously I don't think he's going to be able to, so I don't know. But I think it was foreshadowing. But yeah, really cool moment. But then we go back to Carol and Ash, and obviously the whole thing here is, yeah, I want to go to France. And at this point, you know, Ash was really upset because of everything that happened with Carol and all that beforehand and all of that. But he eventually decides, you know what, I'll help you go to France because if we can find your daughter, then I think that would be absolutely amazing, right? And so they're preparing for the trip. And I still, at this point, honestly, it's shocking that Carol even lied about the whole situation. And I like the fact that in terms of the writing, they are very aware of a lot of this, right? Because Ash actually asks Carol, like, well, why now, right? And that's one thing that I think if they never addressed in this episode, a lot of fans would be wondering about, like, why is Carol wondering about Sophia now? Like, wouldn't Ash ask about that? And I feel like, yes, if this was bad writing, like if the episode was written by bad writers, then that's something that people would point out and it would just be like, yeah, this makes no sense. But the writers thought of this. And so Ash asks Carol, like, well, why now? Like, why didn't you want to go before? Why did you wait 10, 15 years later sort of thing to go and see if your daughter's in France? Because she's going to be a lot older now, right? Like if she was 12 in the very beginning, you're probably not going to recognize her, this and that. And Ash does mention a lot of that. And Carol's just like, you know what? I'm just hoping to find her. And if I don't, I mean, I'm already preparing myself for that possibility. And Ash is trying to like keep her a bit more positive. Like, well, you never know. Like you could find her, you know, like you still have that possibility, that hope that is there. But the fact that he questioned her, like, well, why now specifically? I thought that was really amazing. Like that was definitely something that, yeah, a lot of us fans would probably point out if they never actually addressed right there. And then we see Daryl and I guess the Mathis group actually intercept Madame Janae's group. And I thought all of this was really amazing. And this is where we get to a lot of the action scenes of the episode. And I liked how they cut back and forth between Daryl and Carol's story, because you have to have Daryl in the episode. As much as you do want to focus on Carol, you do need to somewhat move the Daryl storyline forward a bit, right? And I thought they did that really well here. They sort of set up a lot of how the Nest feels about everything and where Madame Janae is, this and that. And so I thought that mission that they had in this episode was a very small storyline, but they did it well. And I think the action sequence that played out here, again, we saw this like a long time ago, but I thought it was really cool. Actually, I thought that, you know, the fact that Daryl saw Madame Janae, first of all, he saves everybody, but as soon as he sees Madame Janae, he doesn't even think for a second. He just starts to like load his weapon, like, I'm gonna kill you. And like, I was just honestly so surprised by that. I mean, it makes sense. Like, we all know who Madame Janae is. She's very, very dangerous. And so if she's gone, you're gonna save Laurent, you're gonna save a lot of people, right? And so obviously Daryl just deciding to do that in that moment made a lot of sense. But then the explosion from the trap that was set off, or that didn't get set off earlier, actually goes off. And again, that's a little convenient, but that happens all the time in all stories. Like, I think that's fine. Madame Janae runs away. Yes, Daryl could have looked for her afterwards, and like, you know, he kind of just gives up right away. I think, you know, like, first of all, Madame Janae's injured, so like, where would she be? Daryl should have ran around a little bit more to try and find her, but it is what it is. You know, like, those little moments like that, you can sort of overlook when the episode is as great as it was. I think if the episode was definitely really horribly written, then I think that, yeah, maybe you can focus on that a little bit more, but it was a really great episode. So a lot of this, personally for me anyways, I can sort of overlook. We go back to Ash and Carol's storyline, and yeah, they're leaving for France. They have all of this gas here, and then lightning strikes, and then a bunch of chaos happens. Again, another moment that seemed a little insane. I think out of this whole episode, that was the thing that I would probably take out. And the one thing I would criticize was the fact that the lightning struck the barn or the shed or whatever that had all the gas and whatnot in it. Like, that was just a little bit too much, a little too convenient. And I just think that, yeah, I don't know if you really needed that. Honestly, you could have done anything else, really. And yeah, I mean, it was a really cool scene. Like, I mean, to see lightning strike like that, like, obviously very cool. But I just think that they probably could have done it in a more realistic way. But then eventually, though, Carol and Ash leave, and yeah, obviously they take out a bunch of walkers on the way, but a very peaceful and hopeful ending. Carol is very nervous as soon as she's in the plane. Like, she's actually kind of, you know, she hasn't been in a plane before, so she's scared. But Ash says a lot of stuff in terms of, you know, just be calm, you know, take a deep breath. And a lot of what he's saying sounds like a lot of, you know, what Carol heard on the tapes earlier in the episode in the very beginning. So it was just kind of a nice, you know, reference to that. And I thought a really well-written episode overall. They are now on their way to France, and I believe in episode 2, they will land there, or maybe they'll land somewhere else first, and then eventually they leave again to go to France. At least that seems to be what the story is going to be here. So in terms of a reunion for Carol and Daryl, honestly, they might wait a bit. I'm not sure when this is going to happen. We'll have to wait and see after watching episode 2, but if you watch the trailer for episode 2, it looks so good. So yeah, I'll do a video breaking down all of that here, but in terms of this episode, I would rate it a solid 8 out of 10. Little conveniences here and there, but those things happen, and I think that the quality of the episode, how amazing the writing was, the attention to detail in terms of Carol's storyline, I think you can overlook a lot of that here. Nothing crazy exciting happens here. There's no big deaths or anything like that. Ash survived the episode, really amazing, and honestly, after watching this episode, I hope he survives the season. I really like Ash, and so yeah, we'll have to wait and see where the season goes here. So post all your thoughts down below. What would you rate this episode? Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.